We have gathered here in Austin, Texas with a bunch of fantasy football experts, and we are asking them one pertinent question. Who is the one guy you have to buy in Dynasty leagues before we go into the NFL season? You've probably heard this if you follow all these channels, but every guy has a number one Dynasty buy. And we got Zach over here from Dynasty Land and Fantasy Land. Who's the one guy that you absolutely have to be buying before the season starts?
I feel very confident in this, so I'm glad we're doing this video. Blake Corum. I think Blake Corum, and if you should be able to try at least to roster him in every single Dynasty league that you're in. I think he's one of the best buys right now in Dynasty, point blank period. Rams offense, we know it's very good for a fantasy running back. We've seen that. But did you guys know last 7 years under Sean McVay, they've had a top 2 points per game finisher at the running back position 3 out of the last 7 years, and top 21 5 of the last 7 years. I mean, this is cash money for a running back in fantasy football. Now, why am I interested in Blake Corum? Because I don't think the job security is as strong with Kyren as other people do. First off, Kyren's been in the NFL for 2 years, hasn't been able to stay healthy a single season, right? Let's look through this. 2022, broken foot in OTAs, high ankle sprain in week 1. 2023, hip injury in week 4, high ankle sprain in week 6, broke his hand in the playoffs versus Detroit. He's missed 12 out of the last 34 games. That's 35%. Injury Sharks database right now, they give him an 88.7% chance of injury, which is the 4th highest note amongst running backs. And they also have him projected to miss about 3.48 games, which is the most of any running back in the NFL this year. McVay, he's always had like this revolving door since Todd Gurley. No back-to-back 1,000-yard rusher since 2017, 2018. And I just feel like as much as I like Kyren Williams, I would not at all. It wouldn't be like this big shock to me if it's like a split backfield, or if at some point throughout the season, Blake Corum takes over a bigger part of this role. So I think he's a must buy. And by the way, last thing I'll just quickly say is on the goal line, I think you can make a strong argument that Blake Corum is maybe the preferred option at some point. This is a guy who has scored 50 touchdowns, and a lot of them from the goal line at Michigan in the last 3 years. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely on board with this one. I think Sean McVay can turn really anybody into an elite fantasy running back.
Maybe me.
Maybe Zach.
I might be able to go out there for a couple plays and figure it out.
Yeah, legitimately. Like Darrell Henderson gets work when he's the lead back. Cam Akers has gotten work when he's the lead back. I think with Corum, you're kind of playing it long term because Kyren, he's in his 3rd year in the NFL. 2 years from now, maybe he moves on in free agency. But like you said, he's going to be one of the best handcuffs in fantasy until then. Potentially standalone role, potentially has a bit of he works into Kyren Williams' workload. I'm not huge on Kyren as well. I think that it's possible that he's a product of Sean McVay's offense. So definitely not in disagreement here. I think that Blake Corum's definitely a good buy.
And by the way, just to throw this out there, like there should be no concern that this changes next year. Like with Kyren and Blake, I don't see this team investing in running backs early until Kyren leaves if they don't sign him long term. So I think you have like that handcuff status on a really good offense for a long time. It's almost like if you handcuff Ken Walker with Zach Charbonnet, but the offense is for the running back going to be a superstar status,
Yeah, so it's a long-term play and a short-term play at the same time. So I definitely appreciate you coming on, Zach. We're going to get some more takes flying as we come up. We're going to be joined by his partner, bdge, in a second. So we are now joined by bdge, the other half of Dynasty Land here. We are heading over to the quarterback position. Superflex folks, obviously pay attention here. Who are you buying this season? Who's the one guy you can't stop buying going into fantasy drafts, Dynasty drafts this year?
Yeah, for me, I think a guy that's being completely disrespected in the community based off his situation and everything that's happening right now is Justin Herbert. Obviously, we know that he's injured. I think outside of the injury, I think the biggest argument has been, well, he has no weapons. We don't know what's going to happen with McConkey, right? He's a rookie wide receiver. They get him in early second rounds, et cetera, et cetera. I understand that. But also the biggest argument is Jim Harbaugh and what he was been doing. He's coming from college. It's been a while. He's been since in the NFL. Also, how his offense back in the day, he always had run-first offense. But I think, for me, I did a little bit of research a while back ago from 2011 to 2014. If you average Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick within that span, they were average QB 11, averaging 16 fantasy points per game. If you look at Justin Herbert and his 4 years that he's been in the league so far, I mean, he's been averaging QB 9 and 20 fantasy points. So there's no doubt in my mind that Justin Herbert is a better quarterback. And one last thing before I'll kick it back up to you is that Justin Herbert this past year, while not finishing the season, scored more points than Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff, 2 attacks. Baker Mayfield, Trevor Lawrence scored 0.1 less points than CJ Stroud.
Yeah, Herbert's been a tough one for me because I go back and forth on, his redraft outlook. Like you said, a lot of people have this narrative built around the Chargers. They're going to run the football, and I think there's definitely credence to that narrative.
No question, yeah.
For sure. But at the same time, in Dynasty, especially in Superflex, the insulation of having one of the best 5 to 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, it gives you so much safety year over year. So with Herbert, I worry, for example, that if you're a contender, he might not be the best redraft projection in 2024.
Sure.
But in rebuilding situations, long terms.
Exactly.
So again, if you're buying Justin Herbert, my stance on Justin Herbert is that he's great for rebuilds, but maybe not so much for contending windows because, like you said, a little bit up in the air with the weapons core. You got a rookie as your number 1 receiver. For year 1, I feel like similar guys in that area, Kyler Murray and so on and so forth, could be better options as far as contending windows. But long term, I mean, it's hard to touch the shelf life of an elite quarterback.
Yeah, and look, yes, for right now, year 1 with this whole new regime, sure, you have to wait and see what's going to happen, and then we'll have a little bit more of an understanding. Going into next year, what if they do have a top pick? What if there are one of these teams that don't sign T. Higgins, for example, or whatever that looks, Chris Godwin is no longer, whatever, right? Yeah. Whoever goes to this team is like, oh my gosh, now Justin Herbert has somebody that we know or that we trust that has proven production or has just gotten one of the best wide receivers hypothetically in the 25 class, right? I mean, we don't really know who's coming in. We can obviously name drop, but you get what I'm saying. Once we get one of these names on this offense, it's like, okay, well, Justin Herbert now has weapons, and then his value starts to rise. Right now, I just checked before I came on, quarterback 12 on Keep Trade Cut. I understand he can easily be, top 8, potentially by the end of the season, or maybe going into next year once they add more weapons to his team.
Yeah, and I understand why people would want Anthony Richardson over him because of what the ceiling outcome looks like, but the floor outcome for Anthony Richardson is that he's Justin Fields. Right? A year from now.
Exactly.
With Herbert, it's a tighter range of outcomes. You're probably not getting QB4 and Keep Trade Cut this time next year because the redraft projection probably isn't there.
Yeah.
But he's not going below quarterback 12.
No, not at all. And this is why you got to go right now and try and get the best value for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, and who knows? If the Harbaugh Chargers aren't 32nd in pass attempts this year, there's a very good chance he's way higher than this by midseason. So, bdge, appreciate you coming on. Let's keep it rolling.
Joined by Avery of Dynasty Domain. Avery, who is the biggest buy in Dynasty right now?
Well, this is a guy you've already talked about this week on a video. So naturally, great minds think alike. I'm going to go Drake Maye here. And Drake Maye is a guy that, you look at Jacoby Brissett coming in and him getting the starting reps, working with the first team during camp, and everybody's kind of like, okay, this is maybe more of a long-term thing with Drake Maye. So with that being said, since we're not going to get immediate production from him, even though, he was a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, I'm just going to fade Drake Maye because, again, everybody wants what they can have right now, right? And with Drake Maye, they want that immediate satisfaction, and they now know that they won't potentially get that. Everybody wants to fade him, right? What I've seen from Drake Maye in the preseason, I love. I think Drake Maye, even so far early in the preseason, has shown improvement from what he was doing at the end of his college career last year. I think that the development in the NFL is going to be huge for him, and I think that he is a guy that is smart enough, a good enough athlete, good enough with the intangibles that he's going to take steps forward as he is on an NFL team and is being developed by a coaching staff. And so I'm not going to lie to you. I think Drake Maye starts there at some point this year, if not more than halfway through the season. I think Jacoby Brissett is great. I'm a Colts fan. Brissett was our starting quarterback for a year. I get it. He's awesome. He's a really good backup level quarterback. He's one of probably the top 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. He is extremely limited. And I think when you have an organization like the Patriots and they go and spend a top 5 draft pick on a quarterback like Drake Maye, on a talent like Drake Maye, it's only a matter of time before everybody in that front office is going to be like, yeah, we want to see this guy on the field. And from a dynasty perspective, I mean, you're buying him right now for equivalent to a 6th, 7th round startup pick, which is just absolutely bananas because the dude could easily be equivalent to a 2nd, 3rd round startup pick if he comes in halfway through the year and does anything. I mean, look at Anthony Richardson. The dude played 3 games max, technically 2.5 games, then came in and showed what he could do. Didn't do anything else. Is going at the 1-2 turn. All we need to see is a little bit from Drake Maye, and I guarantee you see at least a little bit of flash. I mean, he's looked good in the preseason. I guarantee he'll flash during the season, and once he does, he's going to gain 3 rounds of dynasty value. That is a huge value in for your dynasty portfolio.
I am so glad you mentioned the name Drake Maye. Every one of you guys watching out there, you'll know, man, I've had him in the top 24 of my dynasty rankings. He has not budged at all, and I'm so glad you mentioned that the footwork issues are overblown. This is a 21-year-old, 6'4", 220-plus pound, legit Konami profile quarterback. People don't realize, man, He ran for over 700 yards in his second year starting. Like, that is absolutely bananas.
It's significant. And from a fantasy football perspective, it gives him a little bit of a higher floor, right? And in Dynasty, we especially gravitate towards those guys who do have a little bit of rushing upside on top of, being an elite passer. Drake Maye, in my opinion, he is perfectly capable of doing both. I think the Patriots found their quarterback for the future. And I think if you buy him in Dynasty right now, you are not going to regret it.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me, right? Because you got a division with a guy like Josh Allen, and we may just be looking at a guy that could very well be on that type of path.
Oh, absolutely. And you're looking at, the type of prospects they were. Josh Allen was very raw. Drake Maye, I think, is even a little bit more polished, although he has questions in certain aspects of his game, right? And, with Drake Maye, everybody wants to point to the Patriots. I think that everybody looks at the Patriots and they're just like, this has been an awful situation now for a couple of years from a fantasy perspective. And so with that, Drake Maye being in this situation is not good for him. But what you have to understand about, the NFL and quarterbacks in particular is a quarterback makes a situation. Drake Maye will make that franchise, right? I mean, if Drake Maye is what they want him to be, all of the weapons are going to be better. The running backs are going to be better. The team is going to be better from a fantasy perspective. And Drake Maye is going to be the center of that. And when you have a quarterback that is at the center of that, even, similar to a Brock Purdy, Drake Maye is better than Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is surrounded by elite weapons in a great situation. And look at his dynasty value, right? Yeah. I mean, Drake Maye is that, but he's far better prospect. And I'm telling you, when he gets his legs under him, he is going to be fantastic in the NFL.
Completely agree. And just talking about the weapons too, I mean, we love Jalen Polk over here. DeMario Douglas, big time sleeper as well. I've talked about on the channel.
Yep.
I mean, that overall wide receiver room, I mean, Javon Baker, highlight reel after highlight reel. Now, obviously, wasn't able to come down with that deep bomb in the preseason, but we saw Drake Maye's footwork on display there. Evades the rush. Bombs at 65 yards down the field, right in the bucket.
It was a dot, dude. It was an absolute dot. Even just watching that pass, I'm like, the footwork and the awareness in the pocket on that play in particular, I'm like, that's what I looked at. I'm like, that's something I think he's doing a little better already than he did in college. And so when you see that improvement, I mean, a lot of times, again, you're worried with quarterbacks from a dynasty perspective, like, can they develop? You're worried about that with Anthony Richardson, right? Drake Maye, I think not only he can develop, he will develop, or he is developing, has developed a little bit. And again, for a 6th, 7th round dynasty startup pick price, it's like legit my favorite value in Dynasty.
It's absurd. And it's funny you mentioned that, right? Because in a recent Dynasty rookie draft that I did, actually, he fell to the 108. And I was set a quarterback. I had Anthony Richardson. I had Jordan Love. But I'm like, if you're going to let Drake Maye fall to me at the 108, I will be taking him every single time.
It's an absolute no-brainer. Anytime you've got a top 5 quarterback in a Superflex league where quarterbacks are at a premium like that and you have them falling in drafts, this year's been great for rookie quarterbacks in general. But Drake Maye was one of the best ones because, again, people associated the situation with Drake Maye and the Patriots situation with Drake Maye's value. And in reality, again, Drake Maye can absolutely take that franchise again and make them relevant, which as much as a Colts fan, I don't want to see that, but I do think Drake Maye can do it. So.
For sure. Again, appreciate the Drake Maye love. I mean, you have good taste. I mean, it's funny because the 2 buy videos that we did, we actually had the inverse. You guys are going to see the one later on. And obviously in the other video that we did with the land guys, I actually did have Drake Maye as my buy. So we're on the same accordance. We're on the same page. Appreciate you for hopping on, brother.
Absolutely, man.
On with Nathan of Dynasty Domain. Nathan, who is your biggest buy in Dynasty currently?
I honestly don't care what format you're in. Tight end premium, non-tight end premium, start 8, start 10, start 12. You need to be buying TJ Hockenson everywhere. And I can't stop saying it. I've said it like twice in 2 other videos this week already, and I can't stop. I mean, this is what the video is, the guys that you can't stop taking. And for me, it's like have you ever seen that SNL skit with Will Ferrell where he's ringing the cowbell and he's got a fever and he can only be cured with more cowbell? TJ Hockenson is my cowbell, and I'm going to keep ringing it until I get more TJ Hockenson. And I don't care if I own 100% of them. For me, it's an easy situation where without a shadow of a doubt, with his contract installation and his age only being 27 years old, and the fact that he produced as he was on pace to be the tight end 1 last year in fantasy football if he hadn't gotten injured, this guy is guaranteed to increase in value the second he steps on the field again. I don't care if it's week 4, I don't care if it's week 8 or week 10. He will be back, and when he's back, we all know what his upside is and has been dating back to Detroit. So I don't really know what we're missing here or why he's fallen so much. Like you're by default going to see people dip a little bit once they get injured, because it's unfortunate that he's going to miss probably half of the season, seeing him be his old self. But at the end of the day, we're playing Dynasty Fantasy Football, and you play that in 3-year windows. So why would you not take the guaranteed value win at price right now. I don't know. That's just me.
And it's funny you mentioned, because he is an appreciated asset right now in the sense that the market has him depressed because of the injury. The market maybe has him depressed because of JJ McCarthy's hurt. Maybe the bottom line this year at the end of the season may not be as good. But like you said, I mean, this is still a guy that has been a top 5, top 3 tight end in fantasy. And to be honest, I actually feel even better about his long-term insulation.
Me too.
Seeing those strides that JJ McCarthy made in the preseason. Now, obviously, I am a Michigan fan, so I've always been on board with the fact that I think JJ McCarthy will be a very good NFL quarterback. But we did see him adjust to that Kevin O'Connell scheme right away in that preseason game. Again, he will miss this season, so that's more of a long-term play, more of going into next year. But at the same time with TJ Hockenson, he could very well come back, get on that same rhythm he was on at the beginning of last season, and really accrue some value. And yeah, I love the TJ Hockenson call because, quite frankly, this is a tight end producer that is being valued in a position where, quite frankly, there's a lot of non-tight end producers in that range.
Correct. Yeah, and I'm not too worried about whether it's Darnold or whether it's JJ McCarthy or whoever's at QB there. At the end of the day, the tight end is always the easiest target to get the ball to. And for a young developing QB like JJ McCarthy, I think he's going to lean on him quite a bit when he comes back healthy as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love the call. Again, like we mentioned, Colson Loveland in Michigan as well. And just having the insulation of the Kevin O'Connell scheme, I really do feel like will help this offense have a steady floor once McCarthy's ready to return. And even Darnold, I mean, he hasn't looked bad so far, and he could very well have a breakout year. I mean, even with the 49ers last year in that game that he started, did look good. So maybe Darnold is just better than advertised, you know?
We'll see.
Appreciate having you on, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
So we had Danny and Nathan set the table pretty perfectly for us for the Minnesota Vikings. I got Mason here from Fantasy Flock. Who are we buying in Dynasty this year heading into the season?
We're going to buy someone that I wish I would have drafted last year, Jordan Addison. Now, good news for us. His offseason has gone horribly wrong. So the price has fallen a considerable amount. If you're looking at it, red flags that you have to talk about at the gate. Quarterback play this year will be absolutely garbage. Long term, hopefully it'll be good, but it's no guarantee. You have an alpha you're competing with Jefferson, and at the same time, you have potential legal concerns. But if we take a step back, you look at the profile, Biletnikoff winner, round 1 NFL draft pick, early declare, and then what he did as a rookie, it puts him in a comp of guys that typically would project out to be a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy the following season. Obviously, his situation has gotten dramatically worse than it was last year, so I don't think you should ever project him to try to be a wide receiver 1 this year. Obviously, he projects out to be more so a high-end wide receiver 3. But right now, if you're looking at where he's priced in Dynasty, you get him as a wide receiver 3. Now with the McCarthy injury, I think that there's a small chance he can actually fall into that low-end wide receiver 3 bucket. And at that price point, I'm fine buying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jordan Addison was a guy that I was very high on coming out as a prospect, and into his first season, you saw like a very Calvin Ridley-esque rookie year where it's high efficiency, 10 touchdowns, and Calvin Ridley was my comp for Jordan Addison coming out of USC as well. So I think that's kind of the profile we're looking at here. We know he's probably never going to be the number 1 there because Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in the league, but I feel pretty confident that Jordan Addison, once this dust settles on the legal situation, once the dust settles on how we expect his quarterback play to be, he's one of these guys that's almost like a guaranteed profit as well, where you're buying him kind of at his basement level price tag right now. And I feel pretty good about that. So I don't know. Addison, one of these dudes that I feel very, very confident saying, if you're a rebuilder, go out and send an early second-round pick. You'd be surprised if people are selling Jordan Addison for because they're worried about the legal stuff. They're worried about the quarterback play.
Yeah, definitely. And especially if you're a rebuilder, I think it's possibly easier to pivot off a veteran for him. You know, like I know y'all mentioned Stephon Diggs a lot, but Diggs would be a great example of someone who projects out to be a significantly better option in the short term than Addison. So what I think you can maybe do instead, you're not going to get Addison straight up for Stephon Diggs, but if you could go Diggs and then a little bit of a sweetener on top, like Diggs in a third, you know, and try to go pivot to Jordan Addison, specifically for a rebuilding team. I think the upside you have the offense is probably Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith. What you would need to see for that to happen is JJ McCarthy's a good quarterback. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I think Addison's reasonably priced, so I'm willing to pay to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. Mason, appreciate you for joining us. We'll close it out with me and Danny's takes here. So we are back to close this video out. Of course, the two FSC boys here. We got to give you our biggest buy. You guys will probably know this as viewers of ours, but we'll start with Danny. Who is the guy that you absolutely have to buy before the season starts?
Yeah, before the season starts, if you are not buying Rashee Rice, you are doing it wrong because he's still valued as the wide receiver 28 in Dynasty as a 24-year-old who produced at wide receiver 1 level down the stretch last year. He is, in my opinion, the number 2 target on this team behind Travis Kelce, and he's really proven that at the downstretch, like I said, of last season. In the games that he played, over 70% of the snaps, week 8, week 9 on. I mean, I still remember I was doing the wide receiver tier list every single week. This was a consistent wide receiver 1 in my rankings. Now, we obviously know the offensive insulation tied to Patrick Mahomes, a guy that as a rookie produced over 900 receiving yards, produced 7 receiving touchdowns. There's so much room for him to potentially increase in value, not to mention with Patrick Mahomes, we've referenced it on the channel, but you can make the case that there's a lot of positive regression due in terms of his passing touchdowns. 27 passing touchdowns thrown last year with, I would say, a shaky wide receiver core. Now, of course, Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown, people will argue as more target competition for Rashee Rice, but I think they impact different parts of the field. Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown, obviously increasing the third level validity of this offense. Rashee Rice doesn't really have the profile to work at the third level. He's more so your intermediate threat, your yards after catch threat, and it's really a perfect blend for how this wide receiver core works. You have your field stretchers. You have obviously Travis Kelce, which, again, there's a real possibility at 34 years old, Travis Kelce showing some decline last year, maybe even takes a further step back, and Rashee Rice, with how productive he was as a young player, even takes a step forward. If he has 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns this year with Patrick Mahomes, wide receiver 28 is going to look almost laughable in a year time.
Yeah, he would very easily be a top 12 receiver with that type of production there. So, I mean, with Kelce, you know that he's getting older. You know that they affect the same area of the field. Like you said, Kelce's decline would directly benefit Rashee Rice. And Rashee Rice getting better as a player also directly benefits Rashee Rice. So we've talked about Rashee Rice a lot. My guy's Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you guys know I've been buying this dude all offseason. I think he's my highest rostered quarterback in my 12 dynasty leagues that I'm in right now. And Trevor Lawrence, the reason I'm so confident in Trevor Lawrence is because he's an exciting young quarterback who had his team 8-3 before his injuries. He suffered a lot of injuries. The offense collapsed down the stretch last year. And he just frankly didn't play that well. But prior to that, we have a big enough sample size of Trevor Lawrence being a needle-moving quarterback, hence why the Jaguars paid him like they paid him. So I think with Trevor Lawrence, you look at the fantasy production, a guy that can run, who has given you something on the ground, 3, 4, 500 yards and 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns, in addition to now having what I consider to be a much more favorably structured offense for his skill set. You had Calvin Ridley pigeonholed into this like field stretching role that he doesn't really fit. And Brian Thomas Jr. looks incredible so far in the preseason. Gabe Davis, if he can do anything, it's stretch the field. And Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram are obviously your over-the-middle kind of threats. Again, if you notice a trend with our two guys, it's like we just like the way that the offenses are structured, and we want pieces of it. You obviously with Rashee Rice, and me with Trevor Lawrence. Anything you have on Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, obviously, the contract insulation is a big factor, him getting that big money deal. And like you said, adding a more balanced, more complementary offense. Having a guy like Gabe Davis, again, even if he's your sacrificial, downfield wide receiver, it opens up so much more underneath for this offense, like you said, with Evan Ingram, a guy that was the tight end 2 in fantasy last year, adding Brian Thomas Jr., which, I mean, against your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, every single member of your secondary, even Todd Bowles himself said that Brian Thomas looks like the real deal, and we've seen it in spurts in this preseason. And, of course, Christian Kirk, a consistent target commander, a guy that will dominate from the slot. If Trevor Lawrence is the type of talent that we both believe he is, there's a possibility that he really accrues into a first-round caliber startup pick.
Yeah, the whole offense collectively collapsed. It was the offensive line, it was Travis Etienne, it was Christian Kirk going down, it was Lawrence being banged up. I think it was just, it left a bad taste in everybody's mouth, similar to like what we saw with the Eagles last year. And I just think this Jaguars offense is better than people are giving it credit for. So I was buying Trevor Lawrence all offseason, and I'll continue to do so. And I think by week 5, week 6, we'll definitely know the answer to, is Trevor Lawrence worth that contract or not? And I believe he absolutely is. Thank you guys for joining us for this. We went through all the fantasy experts that we have here in Austin, broke down exactly who they cannot stop buying before the 2024 season kicks off. If you guys want all of our Dynasty content, that is available on flockfantasy.com. Use code FSE for a 7-day free trial, 6 months for free when you sign up annually, and 30% off. And of course, when you sign up annually, you can get a free team review done by the two of us, and we'll break down exactly what your dynasty roster looks like, the trades that you should make, what teams in your league are strong, what teams in your league are weak, are you a contender, are you a rebuilder, basically a personalized dynasty decisions episode. So hit that link down below in the description if you guys want to check out Flock Fantasy. And of course, you get all of the creators that you've heard today. You get all their rankings, all their bonus content, their draft guides, their databases. That is the benefit to you guys of being a subscriber to our site. With that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.